Welcome all to another episode of Northern Lights Books Author Interview Plunge. Today's guest is Professor Gary Guinn. Gary was an English professor for over 30 years, and I have to tell you folks, his wit and language skills are on display in the writing that he shared with me. Retired from academia, Professor Guinn now travels with his wife and their dogs. You'll notice they're in an RV. He sails and writes literary and mystery thrillers set in the southern U.S. His poetry and fiction have appeared in several anthologies, the latest being Yonder Mountain from the University of Arkansas Press. His first thriller, Sacrificial Lam, was published by the Wild Rose Press in March 2017, and he's currently working on A Lamb to Slaughter, the last two set on a small southern college campus. I'm guessing that all those troublesome students meet their comeuppance in his Lamb series books. At least that's what I would do anyway. In his free time, Professor Guinn brews and drinks beer. So I'll be planning on visiting him sometime soon. Here's how Gary starts A Lamb to the Slaughter. In the dim lighting of the stairwell, the flashes from the police camera illuminated the body, hanging inert and heavy, and cast grotesque shadows on the concrete wall, barely registered on the retina before they were gone. The voices of the officers working the scene were subdued, quiet, and strained, as if they were friends of the dead. Folks, just reading this, I got to tell you, you're right there. You're in there. You can see the stairwell. You can hear the subdued voices. When an author transports a reader into a scene, you're in the hands of a master. Good job, Professor. Nicely done. Everybody, please welcome Professor Gary Guinn. Gary, welcome. Good to have you here today. I'm going to go right into the questions. Is that okay?
That's great. Thank you very much for the intro.
My pleasure. Professor Guinn, the title character in your thrillers is Dr. Lam Corso, a 41-year-old professor of English at Mid-South Methodist University. Convince me that Dr. Corso has nothing in common with you.
That would be impossible. Anybody who knows me and reads the book knows that there's quite a bit of Lam Corso that came from my own teaching experience at not at Mid-South Methodist, but at a small school called John Brown University. But a lot of that book actually came from my own experience and from me. Yeah, I started that book actually almost as a lark, because I've been writing literary historical fiction before that, and I was really pretty stuck, and I felt like I was, I don't know, drying out or something. I thought I got to do something really different just to get off this. I found myself revising more than I was writing new material. So I just said, well, heck, I'm going to write something. And I like reading crime fiction, so that's what I decided to do. Yeah. So I just started with me and my colleagues at a small college and went from there.
Excellent. And they're very good reads, folks. You really need to pick them up. I notice you have another character, Dr. Ronald Ballesteri, professor of comparative literature, whose wavy black hair hangs down over his forehead. Is Dr. Ballesteri Watson to Dr. Corso's Holmes?
No, there's actually another character who's the Watson, and it's really interesting. It's a bit like that relationship. There's a psychology professor at the small college who is based on someone who's a very good friend of mine at the university where I taught. And he and I have gotten a kick out of me using him so much as the Watson to Corso's Holmes. You know, the basic idea for the first novel, Lamb to Slaughter, Sacrificial Lam, is based on something that actually happened to this psychology professor that I'm talking about. Back many years ago, fairly early in my teaching career, and his also, he and I were both liberals at a very conservative, small southern university. And we have never hidden the fact that we have very progressive positions and so forth. And so about not long after I came there, this professor, the psychology professor, and a couple of other professors who were well-known liberal voices on campus actually got death threats. They got letters that were at first were sort of subtle and whatever, but when they didn't respond, those letters got absolutely creepy, and in the end, the last letter that this friend of mine got said, "We're going to wipe you from the face of the earth." And so it was a really strong, direct, anonymous threat.
Yeah.
The school figured out who they thought was doing it as a student, one of those students who was sort of, from a survivalist background and super conservative and the whole 9 yards, right? Very conservative religiously and all of that. And so, that's the idea. The letters stopped and nothing happened to the professors, but it really upset. I mean, they were really disturbed by the whole thing. And so it stopped and they didn't get hurt. But that was the idea. When I thought I'm going to write a mystery, a crime novel, that came to me, and I thought, well, I'm going to start there. I'm going to start with an English professor, sort of based on me, getting a death threat. Just went from there. Yeah.
Interesting. Sometimes you write from a woman's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the secret to a mature white guy? Notice how polite I am. What's the secret to a mature white guy writing from a young woman's perspective, and how do you validate that material?
Oh boy, I'm happy to say I've had a number of women tell me that I hit it, that I nailed it in certain areas when I was writing from a woman's perspective. And I don't think there is a secret to it. I certainly don't know the secret. I do know that when you get into the character, when you let yourself try and become the character you're writing, the person is deeply human. And so the first thing I go for is, what is the deeply human response here? And then, of course, I have to turn that to what is the deeply human response from this particular character, this female character. And I confess that there have been a number of times when I've taken a page to my wife and said, would you read this and just make sure I'm not, saying something really stupid. And she's been very helpful in that respect. But I do think, women authors have written from male perspective for centuries,
Mm-hmm.
and men have tried to write from women's perspective. I think it's a little more risky being a man writing from a woman's voice, simply because the experience of women has been so troubling in the patriarchal history of our culture, that a man's got to be really careful stepping in there and trying to think he knows what a woman feels or thinks.
Excellent liberal perspective. Thank you. Okay. You're currently traveling by RV through the south central U.S. to California, and you told me a moment ago that you're in the desert of Arizona right now.
Yeah.
Is this pure pleasure? Are you taking story notes as you go along, something for Professor Lam to do later on, maybe doing some signings or promotional touring?
Well, it's not a promotional tour, but I have had a chance to sell a few books. We're here in this particular spot, Quartzsite, Arizona, as part of a gathering of people who drive and own this particular kind of RV. It's an old RV. It's called a Safari Trek. So
Mm-hmm.
we're here, and that's what the club is called, and they're all over the United States. They stopped making these things back in 2008. They made them from 1991 to 2008. Ours is in 1992. It's one of the earliest treks made. And we're lucky that it's in really good condition. It was kept very well by the people who owned it before us. But these trekkers, they gather in different parts of the country once a year to have these rallies. And so we thought, we've only had this RV for about 3 or 4 months, and we thought, what the heck, we'll go see what's going on. We're not really groupies, we're not the kind of people that, yeah, let's go join that group. But online with a couple of these people, and they're so nice and so helpful, and we needed to know so much about this RV that we came here, and oh man, my head's spinning, all the things that they taught us how to do and the tricks of the trade and that kind of thing. But honestly, we wanted to get out of the cold weather because, in Arkansas, the winters can be not bad at all, mild, or sometimes they can get really nasty. And this year we had a very mild fall and early winter, but boy, it turned nasty down to single digits and snow and some ice, and we just barely escaped most of that. So,
well, welcome to in New England on a warm day there.
Oh boy.
Okay.
I couldn't do a New England winter.
No, well, we're deciding against it. But anyway, 30 plus years as an English professor. I'm guessing you know all the rules, how they apply, how they work, and when and how to break them. So do you use first readers or critiquers to go over your books?
Oh yeah. See, my objective in life since I retired has been to forget all the rules and all of that stuff. I'm trying not to let that get in the way of writing, just getting it out there. And so I'm like everybody else. I get that first draft out there, I write it, and I try not to do too much with it. And then I have a writing group. Yeah, there are 3 of us. The other 2 are also writers, and we exchange chapters as we go along. We're all 3 working on novels. So I need a writer's group. Yeah, I need critique. Everybody does.
Excellent. Your published books, A Late Flooding Thaw, that was published in 2005 by Moon Lake Publishing, and your latest, Sacrificial Lam, that was published in 2017 by the Wild Rose Press. There's a time span there. We got 12 years between them. What was the delay about? Was it just not ready to write? What was going on?
Well, it was a variety of things. It's sometimes I wonder the same thing. I wonder why it took so long to get around to finishing. I actually, during that time, I have a manuscript of a sequel to that first literary historical novel. It was set back, the beginning of the 20th century, and I have a manuscript that I was working on all during that time. But that's what I was kind of talking about earlier when I said I reached a kind of a place where I got stale and I started revising. I spent 2 or 3 years mostly revising and not writing fresh material, except for a few short stories that were getting published here and there. And so I don't know. It just happened that way, and I don't want it to happen again because I don't have all that many years, and I want to wait till the next one.
Understood. Could you share your experiences with Moon Lake and Wild Rose? I'm not familiar with those publishing houses. Are these established publishing houses? Are they indie? Were those self-publishing ventures you went through?
Well, no. The first one was a new publishing house, and it didn't last all that long. It was actually the person who founded it. I knew her, and she knew me, and she contacted me and said, I want to publish your book as one of the first books that we published. And so, because she had read parts of it and so forth. And so that's how the first one came about. But I mean, she didn't know much about publishing. It was all new to her, and didn't have much of a promotional budget. And really, I think over about a 3 or 4 year period, just, ran into too many snags, closed the publisher. And so one kind of sidelight to that is when she closed the publishing house, a librarian in the Central Arkansas Library circuit emailed me and said that this person, the publisher, had donated a bunch of boxes of books to them. And he said, I've put them in all our libraries, but I can't do anything with the rest of them, so I'm going to have to get rid of them. Do you want them? And I said, heck yeah, So I drove down to Little Rock, about 3 hours away, 3.5 hours away, loaded up my trunk and my back seat with boxes of books, brought them back. And so ever since then, I've been just sort of selling them on the side and, using them as prizes and all kinds of stuff. And then the other publisher, the Wild Rose Press, is an established publisher. They've been around for a dozen years or so. They started out as a romance press, and they're still very heavily into romance novels. But they've started branching out into mystery and some historical, that kind of thing. And so, yeah, when I submitted when I saw that they were branching out, I submitted my manuscript to them, and they accepted it. Worked with the editor for 6 or 8 months to get it how they wanted it, and so then they published it. And I don't think I'll go. Well, I may. I'm struggling with whether to go with them again, because their main focus is publishing online. I mean, publishing electronically, right? And so they do publish paperbacks, but it's publishing on demand, which a lot of small publishers are going to. And they don't distribute to bookstores and so forth. So it makes it harder for me in a way, in the marketing end of this. And so, but they're a good publisher. I mean, they have hundreds of authors that they're publishing, and they seem to be a pretty happy group. But because they have been in romance for so long, the vast majority of them are women, and they're women romance writers. And I have loved my interaction with them. They're just great people. But it's kind of the fit for me is just not quite what I'd want it to be.
Okay, you mentioned that you were writing kind of a sequel to a Late Flooding Thaw, which, by the way, if people want a copy, they should come to you directly. Just so people know.
Yeah.
And in the process of writing that sequel, you kind of had like a writer's block, more or less, for a couple of years or a while there. So that leads me to ask my next question. What did you find most useful in learning how to write? How do you deal with writer's block? What's been useful? What's been least useful? And writer's block specifically, what do you do with that? You just write another genre completely, is what you did? You said, well, the heck with this. I'm going over there.
Yeah, what I did, I sort of said it earlier, but when I found myself at that kind of stalemate and wanted to do something, anything, what I did was I just said, okay, I'm going to write something so totally different from anything I've written before, and I'm going to have fun with it, and I'm not going to write it aimed at publishing. I'm just going to write it to be writing and creating. And so that's why I went to the mystery thriller genre. That's why I used myself and all my friends at the school, and something that really happened. I just wanted to write, and I used the NaNoWriMo as a kind of kickoff. Are you familiar with that? National Novel Writing Month, their whole organization, what they do every November. Well, I had heard of it, and it was October, and my wife and I were visiting friends in Florida, and I said, if I'm going to do this, I need something to kick me in the butt and get it going. And so I got into the NaNoWriMo thing, and I said, I'm going to accept the challenge, 50,000 words in the month of November. And so I spent 2 weeks outlining the novel and revising the outline and expanding it and working on it. And it was fun. And so I was finally having fun again writing. And then started November 1, wrote like crazy. By November 25th, I had over 50,000 words and said, well, good, here's some. Then I thought, I put all this into this. Heck, I'm going to see if I can get it published, And so then I had to sort of adjust some things, so it wasn't quite so clear who I was talking about and those kinds of things. I don't want to get myself in trouble with my old friends. And then that's what I sent to the Wild Rose. And that's what, they said initially, the editor that I was working with initially said, this is not very genre-like at times. You know, we need to make this fit the genre better. And I told her I've only been writing literary fiction. She said, yeah, well, I can tell that. And so you're good. And so, you know, there was a little give and take there.
Yes.
She'd say, you need to do this. And I'd say, no, I can't quite do that. It's just not me. So there was a lot of compromise in the process. But I really love writing literary fiction. So.
Understood.
Yeah.
What is something memorable you've heard from your readers and fans?
Wow. You know, fans. Do we have fans? You have fans?
Yeah, believe it or not, I do. I'm shocked myself, but I do have some fans.
What fans? I don't even know. Oh, I've got a fan in my RV to blow the air. It's
Okay.
you know, no, one of the most fun things that I've heard. There are two things that I really liked, and people wrote in reviews and, you know, comments and so forth. And one of them was a person said something like, "Buy the book and lock your doors," you know. And I thought, well, that's great. That's good, you know, good promotional material for the book. Buy the book and lock your doors. And another person that told me that the best thing about this Lam Corso novel was the style, you know. So I was kind of sad. In other words, they said this reminds me of Dashiell Hammett, Raymond Chandler, and those guys. And I thought, boy, I could never get a better compliment than that, because I happen to think those are two of the best stylists, you know, ever.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've talked about your characters. So Dr. Corso and Dr. Ballesteri have just spent a day traveling with you in your RV. And now they're off by themselves. What are they saying about you?
What are they saying about me?
Yeah, they just spent a day with you.
Yeah. They just spent the day with me in the RV. And one of the things, immediately, Lam Corso would say, that's a cranky old so-and-so, isn't he? And then Ballesteri would say, yeah, he's full of hot air. My gosh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about.
But he knows how to write.
Yeah, but then but then they would say, but you know, he does a pretty good job of putting us on the page. That's what
Obviously,
would say anyway.
they're intelligent characters. Obviously, you've created very intelligent characters. All right. If you could have been the author of any book ever written, which book would you have written?
Wow, there are two or three. The first one I would always say is Louise Erdrich's Love Medicine. Native American, you know, Lakota Sioux culture. I love that stuff. And I think that novel and Tracks, which are close to each other, are two of the most beautiful novels I've ever read. Oh, I'd like to have written either one of those. Then there's a novel that's way different from that, but it's by a guy named Lewis Norden, who was at the University of Arkansas in the creative writing program there many years ago. And then he moved up to Pittsburgh, but he's from Itta Mississippi, and he was a Mississippi writer. He was right in the whole Flannery O'Connor and the others, you know, school of the kind of Southern Gothic writing. But the difference between him and Flannery O'Connor, I love Flannery O'Connor, but she just doesn't seem to love her characters very much. She just, sometimes I go, God almighty. But Lewis Norden had the weirdest, most grotesque characters, but it was clear that he loved these people. They're so the novel Sharpshooter Blues, if you ever want to read a novel that's funny and make you cry and make you laugh, it is a beautiful novel. One of my favorites now, Sharpshooter Blues by Lewis Norden, Nordan.
I have made a note. Thank you. Okay, last question, because I know you're on the road. What question do you wish that someone would ask about you or your books, but nobody has?
Wow, that's a really interesting question, Joseph.
I do what I can. Hey.
You do your best, don't you? There's there's a question I wish somebody had asked me. Yeah, about me or my books.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe about the late flooding thaw and the one that's coming up from that. Why? I wish somebody might have asked, why is that culture why are those people so important to you? And
Okay. Go ahead.
somebody had asked that. Yeah.
Okay, Gary, out of curiosity, that book you wrote, A Late Flooding Thaw, and the sequel to it, why are those people in that culture so interesting to you?
It's funny you should ask. Yeah, I'll tell you, it's because I have deep historical family roots in the southern Ozarks, in northern Arkansas, where those books are set. My great grandfather, he was a first lieutenant in the Second Mounted Kentucky Rifles in the Civil War, and so we've got all that stuff history, like most Southerners do. But after the Civil War, he was in Kentucky, and he moved his family to the northern Arkansas, to the southern Ozarks here. And we've been here ever since. Been there ever since. I'm not there right now. But yeah, my great grandfather was a welder and a metal worker, and was known in the area for the way he worked wagon wheels, the metal bands on. He had a special process for fusing those. My grandfather had a general store in a small town called Delaney over on the White River, and lost it in the Great Depression. Went to work in the aircraft business, helping building airplanes and so forth. My father and my aunts and uncles were born and raised in that area, and so when I go back over to the White River there in northern Arkansas, I just feel something there, that deep connection that with the Ozarks, with the White River region, with the people who live there. That's it. Yeah.
And that makes for excellent writing and excellent reading. Professor Guinn, I want to thank you for your time. I've enjoyed myself. I hope you've had some good laughs here today.
I loved it.
Have safe travels, pleasant journeys, safe harbors, wherever you end up. And please keep on writing. Keep us posted, because I love the stuff that you send me. I want to read more.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Joseph.